So in today's video I'll be showing you how to make my Amy bouquet. This one is in a really lovely deep Cadbury purple. This is a Daler Rowney grape and it's been made with Harry Potter book page roses. And I will put a little gallery in at the end of the video so you can see all the different colours, and I'll show you a couple now as well. But yeah, you can make this in any colour that you want, and you can customise it in any way that you want as well. It's a lovely size. You can hold it with two hands just about, and one hand is perfect. You know, I'm an adult and that's how it's for me. And if you make them for yourselves and you're making them for smaller bridesmaids, you can easily trim the stems so that it's smaller for smaller hands. This is a perfect size for bridesmaids, and it's even been used as a wedding bouquet as well on many occasions. I can't tell you how many I've made for wedding bouquets. But it's such a classic little neat compact little posy. You can make it in any colour, in any book, and you know, for bridesmaid, have a go and let me know if you do. It's very similar to this one, except the centre rose is going to have a coloured paper rose. So if you're familiar with this bouquet and making this bouquet or any of my other bouquets, you may want to skip to the part where I make the coloured rose and or the assembly part. So if you have a look in the video description, you'll see that there are timestamps, and you can very easily jump around to the part of the video that you would like to watch. To make this rose, you will need an old book. You will need one sheet of coloured paper, A4, to make the coloured rose for the centre. Now you can use absolutely any colour that you like. I'm going to use this nice purple because I haven't made a purple bouquet in quite some time and I'm trying to use up all my stock. So this one is a Daler Rowney grape Canford paper and it's A4 size. You'll also want some ribbon to match. It's very much a Cadbury colour, isn't it? Lovely. And in addition to the papers, you will need, or rather in addition to the purple ribbon, you will need some ivory ribbon for the binding. I mean, you can bind it in purple if you'd rather, but I also like to use this Oasis waterproof poly ribbon for edging the bouquet because the loops it makes are much more sturdy. So I would normally bind the handpiece in ivory and have the trailing ribbons as the colour. But you know, you can do whatever you like. I do sometimes use ribbon, regular ribbon for the ribbon loops. But as I said, they tend to flop down a little bit more rather than look neat and tidy. So yes, you need your ivory ribbon, that's 2 centimetres wide, and the purple ribbon is a double-sided satin, and I think that's 2.5 centimetres wide. The Oasis poly ribbon, this shade is cream, and it's 5 centimetres wide, and it's the kind of curling ribbon, the kind of ribbon that you'd use to decorate the wedding car or to shred for putting on balloons and things. In addition to that, we need some glue, and as always, I like to use wallpaper paste. The link for mixing this up is in the video description. Go take a look if you need to know how to mix that up. You'll also need some glue. Now, it doesn't matter if you use high-tack glue or PVA glue, either will do for this. You'll also need a little bit of sellotape and a dressmaker's pin towards the end. You will also need, oh, the list goes on and on today. You'll also need a stapler some florist tape in green or dark green or light green. You can get brown, but you know, green. Some scissors. As always, you will need those to cut the petals out. You will also need the template for the petal shape. Now, if you've got a printer, you can print that off by visiting the link in the video description. And if you don't have a printer, you can check out the video that I've put together to draw this out yourself. And this is one that I drew out myself. So yeah, do feel free. Now, is that everything? If I've forgotten it or anything else, I will edit it and pop it in later. Oh, I have forgotten something. You will also need, ta-da, some tin foil, some regular kitchen tin foil. This one measures about 30 centimeters long. Yeah, it's not particularly thick. It's not like high quality stuff. It's just regular kitchen tin foil. And that is what you need to make this rose. Right, so first of all, we are going to roll some foil stems. Now, the reason I use foil is because if you use wire and you want to make them into a bouquet, what happens is the wire is so thin. I've got 7 stems of wire here, and you can't really hold it with your hand. You end up holding it with your fingertips, and I always feel that a bouquet you want to hold with your hands. So once I've rolled the foils, I'll show you the comparison. So we take the foil and we want to tear it at about 22 centimeters. Now, it doesn't matter if it's not straight. It doesn't matter if it's a few centimeters under or over. I don't measure it because I've been doing this for years, and so I've got a feel for how big I want them, and I'm sure you will as well. So we want to tear 7 strips. 7. So we want 7 strips of foil, and as I've already mentioned, this foil is about 30 centimeters long, and we do end up trimming it down a little bit. So if your foil is slightly shorter or slightly longer, don't worry. So we take each sheet of foil and we want to fold it in half 3 times. And then at one end, just scrunch it all together and then twist it and roll it at the same time. And what we've got is a stem shape. And do this for all of the other sheets of foil. So we have our 7 stems. Now bear in mind these will be covered with the florist tape later, but if you hold them all together, you can see that they just fit nicely in your hand compared to these that just, you can't really hold them. So you end up holding them like this. And this is why I think for a wedding bouquet or a bridesmaid bouquet, the foil stems work really well. So now we want to cut the petals, and if you have seen any of my other videos, you'll be familiar with this process, and feel free to use the timestamps to jump around to the next bit. So we want to take 4 pages together and simply tear them from your book. Now we want 6 roses for this bouquet. So we're going to tear 6 lots of 4 book pages. And yeah, don't worry if they don't all come out perfectly, we can work around that. So take the first set of 4 book pages and make sure that they're nicely aligned, and then simply fold them in half. And then take your template and hold it up to the edge of the text, and I usually leave a small gap at the bottom where the margin is, and simply cut around your petal shape. And again, you don't have to be extremely precise. It really doesn't matter if some of the petals are slightly different sizes. As an example, I'll show you here. I've left a bit of a gap, it's fine. I mean, obviously you don't want them like a centimetre out, but a few millimetres is absolutely fine. So with most books, you'll get 3 cuts from a book page, and each cut will give us 8 petals, and we need 21 petals to make this rose, to make a single rose. And so obviously the 6 pages will give us slightly more petals than we need, but it's always good to have spares, and you'll see why later on. So just continue to cut all of your petals from book pages. Right, so that's all of the book page petals cut. And if you're making more than one bouquet, I would suggest having a little rest in between cutting out all those petals, because I'd quite often get a sore finger from the scissors. So unless you've got a more comfortable pair of scissors, then that's fine. So I'll just clear the desk and then we'll cut the coloured paper petals. Right, so I'm using a pre-cut A4 sheet of artist paper. And this one, as I've already said, is a Dalo Rowney sheet. And you can get these sheets of coloured paper for under £1. I'm not 100% sure how much they cost now, but these stickers do sometimes damage the paper. So we'll turn it around this way. So from your A4 sheet of paper, what we want to do is we want to fold it so that the template just fits on the fold, on the piece from the fold, if that makes sense. So we want to fold it once and twice. I find if I fold it any more than twice, it's too thick for me to cut without getting a furry edge. So we've basically got three pieces of paper, 2 folds. So in the same manner, we will line up our template to the very edge . and simply cut around. Now, some of the petals will be caught together at the bottom. We just need to snip that across. So each cut will give us 3 petals, and obviously we want to have 21 petals. So when I go to cut the next one, I don't line it up in the same way. To save paper, I will line it up as close to that cut edge as possible. So it's kind of the opposite way around. And again, there'll be one that's joined together at the bottom. So yes, so we cut it there, and this time I'll turn it around and cut it that way. It just reduces on paper waste, and you know, reducing on waste is always a good thing. And also we will just get another cut. If you cut them all the same way around, you won't quite get enough cuts from one row. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cuts from that sheet of paper. So that's only given us 15 petals. So we'll take this last one, and it should just be enough. Just be enough. If we fold it directly in half. So that's 15, and each cut now will give us 2. So there, we have 21 petals, and I'll save this for later. And sometimes I will cut the rest of the petals out, put them in my spares box, because I make quite a lot of these, or I used to make quite a lot of these before I became ill. So yeah, that is all your coloured paper petals, and we've got a bit spare if we make a mistake and need to cut some more. Right, so we need to make 6 book page roses, and I will only show you how to make 1 on this tutorial, and if you need to have a refresher as you're making them, you can use the timestamps in the video description and just click back and rewatch this bit if you need to. Yeah, I just thought it would be easier just to show you how to make 1, and then I will fast forward and show you how to make the coloured rose, and then we'll get on to assembling. So what we do first of all is, as usual, lay out 3 rows of 6 petals. Two extra to the side, and the spares I always put to the left. Just a bit of order, just to keep things running smoothly. And what we want to do is take our wallpaper paste as well, and a thread. I like to roll out an arm's length of thread at a time, just so I don't end up with the cotton reel rolling all over the table. So the first petal that we'll use, we will take from the spares pile, and what we want to do, if I can just get it to focus, is curl it inwards from the right hand side to the middle. And what we're trying to achieve is a cone shape. So we made a little cone shape with an opening at the bottom and a point at the top. And then take your wallpaper paste and simply put a good blob inside the cone shape. So we'll take one of our foil stems and we just want to place it inside the cone shape. And then if you squeeze the bottom bit together and then take your thread and simply bind that in place. I'll put several turns in the thread and it just holds it nicely in place. So I'll pop that to one side for a second, and then at this stage I will put a blob of wallpaper paste onto each of the book page petals in front of us, and I kind of make sure that I put it on the bottom 2 centimeters, not centrally all the time, just a blob, and that works nicely. So then we'll pick up our stem and we'll take the first petal from the bottom row, and what we want to do is align it so that it sits nicely with the bottom of the petal already on the stem. Twist it round and then wind the thread around 2 or 3 times. The next petal, we want to place it directly opposite the petal we've just placed, and again pinch it around and wind the thread in place. This next petal, we want to align it with the edge of the previous petal that we've just placed. So line up the middle of the new petal with the very edge of the previous petal. Wind 2 or 3 times, and that's the process we want to use for all of the rest of the petals. We simply take each new petal and align the middle of the new petal with the very edge of the previous petal. And then once you get into the rhythm with this bit, it can be quite soothing. I quite like to put a little bit of music on, or sometimes if I'm making several, and believe you me, I've had days where I've had orders and I've had to make over 100 roses for an order. I quite often would just put Netflix on or YouTube and sit and watch something in the background whilst I'm making this. If you do have a go at making this bouquet, do let me know how you get on, and I would love to see photographs of your arrangements that you've made. So you can email me on via my website, or you can message me on Instagram, and either would be great. I'd just love to see what you're creating. So the last petal I've put on in the usual way, and I will put some extra turns of the thread, and as I do this I'll kind of move it down towards the foil stem, and then I'll snip it off and take the wallpaper paste, and in the direction of the thread I'll just catch the end of the thread and just put some wallpaper paste all the way around the bottom. And as you can see, the rose is quite closed at this moment, so we'll just use our fingertips to push out the edges of the petals, and you can push them back in, and we want them to just sit nicely and then set aside to dry. Now I would always leave these to dry overnight just to make sure that they're all set and sturdy in place. And don't forget, you need to make 6 of these roses. for this bouquet. So making the coloured rose is a very similar process, except this paper is a little bit thicker and you may need to use the glue gun towards the end, and sometimes because this paper is thicker, the petals sit more open, and sometimes I use fewer petals. So it's the same process. Three rows of 6 petals, with 2 to the right and 1 to the left. Exactly the same process. Roll it in to make the cone shape. Put a blob of wallpaper paste inside the petal. Take one of your stems, place it inside the cone, squeeze it tightly just to hold it in place, and then take your thread and simply secure that in place with several turns of the thread and roll it right the way down. Now if I'm using a darker colour, sometimes I will use a darker coloured thread, because occasionally, if it's very bright, you might see a little bit of white as you look down into the rose once it's completed, but we'll stick with white for now. So again, as usual, we will put a blob of wallpaper paste on each of the coloured paper petals. That's a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? And then pick up the stem, take your first coloured petal, line it up with the petal that's on the stem, twist it around, and you'll see this is a bit stiffer to curl into place, and you'll need to be a bit firmer with the thread as you secure it on. And then the next petal we want to place directly opposite. You can see, I don't know if you can you see this has made quite a bigger curve than the book pages make. So this is why sometimes I use fewer petals. So making sure your thread is nice and tight, we'll pop this next one on there directly opposite. And then the third petal from this bottom row, again it's going to be quite hard to see because of the coloured paper, but we're lining it up so the middle of the new petal aligns with the very edge of the previous petal at the bottom of the rose. So hold it in place and twist tightly with your thread. And continue adding all the rest of the petals, so the new petal, the middle of the new petal aligns with the very edge of the previous petal. This paper is 150 GSM, and sometimes I use 120. And the 120 is easier to make into a rose than the 150. And I definitely wouldn't use anything thicker than 150 for these roses. And these ones with the 150 paper, you generally don't need to open them up at the end as much as you do the book page roses. So if when you're getting to the last row of petals, you're finding, or you're struggling binding the petals in place, or you find the petals are slipping and not gripping, then it's okay to get out the glue gun and just put some of the glue from the glue gun near the wallpaper paste, just enough to hold it in place. I might need to with this one, it's getting a bit tetchy, don't know what else to call it. Just looking to see the size of it, because sometimes I don't need extra petals. I think I just need one extra petal here. I think that's a lovely size. So I've used fewer petals. My thread is starting to slip. I might doubly secure this with, let's see, it started to slip off. So I will just heat up my glue gun just to ensure that the petals stay in place. Right, so my glue gun is heating up, and I'm really glad that this happened. It doesn't always happen, but I'm really glad it did happen, because if you're doing this at home and this happens to you, it will be quite frustrating. So don't get frustrated. It can happen, especially with this thick paper. So I will very carefully, because I don't want to move any of the petals that are in place, very carefully I'll just snip off a bit of the thread. I've got two petals that didn't want to stay in place, and my glue gun is just heating up. So yeah, if you find that the thread starts slipping, you might find that 2 or 3 of the petals just come away, and that's a sure sign that you need a glue gun. So yeah, there's another petal coming off. It's fine. I'm not going to stress about it. So you can see how the thread has just slid all the way down, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of the glue gun onto the section that is still bound and onto the thread, just to make sure that doesn't unravel any further. Just a little dab of glue on the edge of each of the petals on the thread. And then I'll navigate to the last petal that we had. Tiny bit of glue near the wallpaper paste, and I will simply press it into position so that the middle of this petal aligns with the edge of the previous petal. And try not to glue your fingers to the stem. And we'll do the same with the next petal. Tiny bit of glue from the glue gun, line it up, press it into place and hold it until the glue has dried. And the last one. So I'm very happy with the shape of that rose, so I definitely don't need these last 3. And so if you're making several of these bouquets, then you can use these petals for the next bouquet, or if you're making buttonholes or things, you can use those as well. So we've finished this one off with the glue gun, and I will put it to one side with the rest of the roses that I've made just overnight, and then the following day I will assemble everything. Right, so we're going to put on some ribbon loops. So we'll take the Oasis ribbon, and what we want to do is we want to cut it at about 26 centimetres, and we want to cut 3 the same length. And then what we want to do is simply tear it down the middle. That's satisfying, isn't it? So we have 6 strips of ribbon. And then simply fold the ribbon so the bottom ends meet and staple into place. Now the reason I like this poly ribbon, I don't really know what it's made from, the reason I like this is because it stays upright. If you use a soft satin ribbon, it will flop down, the loop will flop down. So on occasions I do use coloured fabric ribbon on an arrangement, but I will still use these poly loops so that they hold the regular ribbon upright. So we have the ribbon loops, and what we need to do is just bind them into place. Now you could use a glue gun if you're looking to do this quickly, but you know, if you've seen any of my other videos, you will know I really don't like glue guns. Oh, I hate getting burnt fingers. I hate the stringiness that happens. Yeah. So we're going to bind, and what I'll do is I will put some high-tack glue just around the stems. I will take some thread, and this is a little bit difficult to do on camera because I don't have much room, and I'll loop it round so that the thread catches over itself. I'll take the first ribbon loop and I will position it so it nestles between 2 of the book page roses, and use the thread 2 or 3 times to bind in place, and then I'll adjust it because it can move sometimes. And then we just add a ribbon loop to nestle between each of the book pages on the bouquet. And sometimes they will flop down like this. Very easy, they just pop back up and they will stay in place. It's just that the thread causes tension on the ribbon and it just likes to go bloop. No, I just like to go bloop. And so once the last ribbon loop is attached, we will just wind the thread a few more times until it reaches just underneath the ribbon and touches the stems. Hold it in place with your thumb, snip it off, and with a little bit of high-tack glue, just run it up to hold that thread in place. So this next stage is a not particularly attractive stage of the bouquet, but what I like to do, because these are going to be held all day for a long day and I don't want these stems to bend too much. So they're a bit flexible and they can be bent, and I don't want that to happen. So what I do, I use some of the poly ribbon again, and this is just gives it a bit more strength on the handpiece. So I'll pull off, I don't know, that's about 60 centimetres, isn't it? And pull it in half, tear it in half, and then what I want to do is put a little bit of this glue in between the stems. Now what this does is when that dries, that will give a little bit more strength to the stems and it will stop it bending a little bit more. This is a bit messy, this stage, because you will get glue on your fingers, but you know, such is life. Take a strip of your poly ribbon, wind it around on itself and then start to pull it nice and tight and wind it down the foil stems. The stems will start to spread out a bit at the bottom as you do this, and that means you've got a good tension on the stems. When you get to the bottom, if you haven't cut enough poly ribbon, take a little bit of sellotape and just wind that around to hold it all in place. Now for the next bit, I'm going to cut off, I don't know, 10 centimetres, maybe 12. I don't measure this because I've just been doing it so long. I do a lot of it by eye, and I know that's not really helpful if you're learning, but you know, I have been doing this for, I don't know, 8 years now. So I'll pop some glue around the bottom of the stems, and I will take a strip of the poly ribbon and fold it over the ends. Take another bit of sellotape and just hold it in place. I did say this part wasn't particularly glamorous, and it's not, but it works. So it works, it makes them sturdy, it means that the flowers will last all day without getting distorted out of place. Put another bit of tape on. And then, because we've still got a gap, I will take another piece of the poly ribbon and cover the other end. Now we've got a bit of a flap going on either side, so I'll put a bit of tape over the end, push it all down. Feel free to be liberal with the sellotape. So what we've got is a much sturdier bouquet. I mean, it still does move a little tiny bit, but it's all held together and it's not going to move. So, you know, you can throw it, you can do what you want, and it will be fine. And I'd just like to say, you can drop the flowers and they don't really get damaged. They'll get damaged if you sat on them, and they'll get damaged if, I don't know, you spilt wine on them or something. But regular flowers would get damaged if you sat on them as well. So let's not get too hung up on them being paper. Right, so we're going to add the ribbon binding now. And what I like to do to start with is to cut 2 lengths of ribbon. And I'm going to measure this because I'm sure you're getting bored of me not knowing the proper sizes. But I'd usually cut about that much, which is 9 centimetres. Okay, now we know. So 2 strips of 9 centimetres. And in a very similar way to as we added the poly ribbon on the bottom, we will add some ribbon, some proper ribbon. A little bit of glue on the end. And what I like to do with this is to take the ribbon and place it so it's just covering half, just over half of the base of the handpiece. You'll see why shortly. Can't find the end of the thread. And we'll take our thread and wind it around the ribbon to hold it in place. 3 or 4 times should do it. See that? And take the second strip of ribbon, and I'm holding the thread in place with my thumb, but at this stage I'm going to just grab the thread between my fingers here so I can lift my thumb and then place my thumb back down with the second piece of ribbon behind it. Now it might look quite complicated, but once you've got the hang of it, you'll be doing this as second nature. So in the same way, we're going to place this so it's just over halfway along the edge, along the base rather, of the handpiece, and a couple of winds of the thread. So these two loose bits at the end, we're just going to hold one down with our thumb and bring our thread up to hold it down. Just snag the end of it. I'm not sure if that's the right word either. I do struggle to describe things when I get tired. So snip off the thread and keep it held down with your thumb, and then we'll take some of the high-tack glue again and just spread that around a little bit, just to hold all the thread in place, and that really does. And in a similar way to how we added the poly ribbon earlier, and we want to place it at an angle so that it winds upwards. I don't know if you can see that, winds upwards just to the top of the handpiece, and pull it round on itself so that we cover everything just nicely, and that makes a really neat finish on the bottom. So it might look a bit nasty and not very aesthetic with the poly ribbon binding, but it really does work. So as you're rolling this up, you may find that the ribbon starts to fold a little bit. You can overcome that by just tucking it in and keep rolling. And again, I don't know if you can see that, I'm just pushing that little fold underneath and keep rolling. Just keep rolling. Right, here we go. So once I get to the top, I'll kind of flip the bouquet over, or the bouquet, and wind it a couple more times so that there's a nice straight edge there. And we will snip off the ribbon. I need some more glue. A little bit of glue. And temporarily we're going to use a dressmaker's pin just to hold that in place. It will push through, and it will push through the foil, and it just holds everything in place. So we'll take some of our better quality ribbon. So yeah, I would normally just cut a good arm length, an arm length and a half worth of ribbon for these bouquets, but you can have them longer and you can add extra ribbons if you prefer. So it's all very simple with the pin facing towards you. Simply tie a loose knot and pull the loose knot up so that it covers the ribbon, the white or ivory ribbon. A loose knot and then another knot just to hold that all in place. Pull out the dressmaker's pin and then take the long lengths and bring them together, and we just want to make sure that the ribbon is the same length, and that is the Amy bouquet. So yeah, thank you for watching, and if you do have a go, let me know, and if you've got any questions, just drop them in the comments, or you can email me, or you can catch up with me on Instagram.